Rainy signatures.
You ready, Ms. Coffey? All right, we are back, and we'll do cross-examination now by Ms. Regularly of Ms. Ashford.
Dr. Ashford, my name is Connie Regularly. I met you briefly in the hallway. I'm here as an attorney today on behalf of Ms. Hubble. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to ask you a few more questions about something that you described occurring yesterday. So, again, just so that it's clear on the record, yesterday would have been May the 11th, 2017, correct?
Correct.
And the incident you are describing happened at Gower Elementary, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, now you described Ms. Casey, who this court has heard from before. She is a counselor, is that right?
That's correct.
And then you also described Ms. Harris, and is that the principal?
Counselor also.
Oh, she's a counselor, okay. And then you described Ms. Pickett, the court has met Ms. Pickett. She is the teacher for DeLar, is that correct?
Correct.
And then you said something about yourself. We're going to talk about that again in a second. Now, in this, and you said it was in the afternoon, like at the end of school. Is that correct?
At dismissal time.
Okay. Now, were there any other staff members that you observed being involved in this?
Ms. Getz.
Okay. Ms. Getz, and the court just met her a couple days ago. She is a vice principal?
Yes.
Okay. All right, now, you didn't really say anything about Ms. Getz, but can you explain to the court what role or what observations you made related to DeLar's interaction with Ms. Getz?
When Ms. Getz came into the office in an effort to shield Delara and move her out of the center of the room, took her to her office so it might be an opportunity for Delara to calm down and not have so many people around her and just between her and Delara.
Okay. And what happened to Ms. Getz? What happened between Ms. Getz and DeLar?
Oh, it was very much a struggle. Delara was not willing to go and was so wrapped up in fighting off that she scratched and bruised Ms. Getz trying to get away, trying to get not go to the office.
Okay, and scratched her arms? Or where did she scratch
Her forearms
Okay.
and her top of her hand.
And did it draw blood?
It did.
And did she do anything else? Did she spit on her or anything?
She did,
She spit on Ms.
which she
Getz?
had never done before. 3 times she did.
Okay. Now, did you have any conversations with Ms. Getz about this morning before you came here today?
I did.
And why would you and Ms. Getz have an occasion to be talking about it this morning?
Because I asked what precipitated it. So we went to view the video because I wanted to see how it went down for myself. Because Delara had said when her dad came to pick her up that the guidance counselor twisted her arm, and I wanted to make sure that that didn't happen. And if anything, nobody twisted her arm. Delara did herself by pulling away and trying to get down and away from her.
Okay, so you saw the video because you wanted to see how it started. Did you see, from the video, what's the first observations that you made of Ms. Delara's inappropriate conduct? What's the first thing you kind of noticed?
Was her running around the tables being non-compliant.
Okay, well, before that, though, she'd gone out in the hallway, right?
She was in the hallway. The table was in the hallway.
Okay.
Running around that table, acting like she was running from adults. And
And was
just
Ms. Pickett out there?
Miss Pickett was sitting there on the table, one of the tables,
All right, and where were the other children?
sitting in the hallway like they're supposed to be, waiting for their name to be called or their bus to be called.
All right, so this was in the presence of quite a collection of children, is that correct?
Absolute, and staff members.
Okay. And did you see any reaction from her as far as looking to see if the other children were looking at her or laughing at her?
No, I didn't notice that.
Okay, so she just kind of did it in her own world. Is that a good summation?
I think so,
And, but obviously in the presence of other children.
yes.
And were the other children seemingly behaving compliant with what they were supposed to be doing?
They were,
So she was a standout.
yeah, she was.
And was the father called to pick her up?
I don't know if they called Dad or if Dad routinely comes. I'm not sure of that. You'll have to ask
Okay,
Dad.
Okay. Were you there when Dad got there to pick her up?
I was.
And then what did you observe between Delara and her dad when he came to pick her up? First of all, where was she? Was she in Miss Getz's office by then?
I think Dad went, I think they brought Delara out to the office. That's when I saw her, is when she was brought out to the office as Dad came in, and Miss Getz stood at the doorway and explained to Dad exactly what had transpired.
Okay, and what was Delara doing?
Sort of just standing there, not being aggressive, but I don't know how involved she was. She didn't seem to care much,
Okay.
but she may have. I mean,
How did Dad react to what he was being told about what happened?
I think he was discouraged that, that had happened,
Okay.
like any dad.
All right, you, in the course of doing this evaluation, it looks like Ms. Pickett was pretty involved with you as far as giving you information.
She was.
You went in her classroom
did.
and made observations
I
and
did.
stuff, and she was pretty cooperative with you.
Absolutely.
Did she go over with you or share with you the some 50 letters that she has in the drawer that other children have written about how afraid they are of Delara?
She, in one discussion, I didn't see all of the letters, but I do know a couple of the children that are in the classroom. One of them is actually the child of our secretary in the front office. And I do know from those accounts, do have information with regard to what the other children think or feel
Okay.
with regard to Delara.
And based upon that investigation in your work, do you have an opinion as to whether or not there are some fear of the other children?
Oh, I truly believe there is. I think it's the lack of predictability that, children typically fear if someone's behavior is not predictable.
And you were asked a question about, by Ms. Rice, about sort of where you would, this behavior that you observed, where you would kind of put this in your analysis, whether it was depression or what, and as you went through that, the last thing that you said, I made note of, where you said got to the point where she appeared to really be out of control of herself. Is that
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
Okay, so in a psychology world, that is psychotic, right?
It can be, yes.
But when,
Certainly in a fight or flight mode.
okay. But their inability to control their own thoughts, their own behaviors at any given point is also an indication of some psychosis.
It can be, not always.
All right, now, you said at the beginning that you had seen Delara 5 or 6 times for about somewhere around 20 minutes apiece. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, I've noticed on your report, it says the date of the first page says February the 15th, 2017, and you signed off on it April the 11th, 2017. So that's about a 2-month period. So I would like for you, and you don't really have dates in your report about when you did certain things or when you made observations. So I would like for you to explain to me, like, let's first of all just talk about your meetings with her to conduct the testing.
Sure.
Those 5 or 6 meetings were over what period of time, perhaps?
Over a couple months.
Okay,
over a couple of months, picking and choosing the best time. The date of the psychological is, we generally use the date that we administer the cognitive assessment.
okay.
So that's the date we use.
But it took you, now, when you say pick the best times, again, did you communicate with Ms. Pickett about that?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
All right.
And there was a date I went to check and see how she was doing, and it was a day she was suspended. There were other days where I went to see how she was doing, and it was not a good day. There were, obviously, I have a multitude of meetings, so I work with children in between those meetings. So the schedule gets pretty hairy sometimes.
Okay. And then also the same way, when I was going through your report and I was looking at particularly pages 2 and 3 where you talked about observations, indirect and direct observations.
Mhm.
You also didn't really identify, like, I went to class this day or something.
No,
So,
I didn't.
do you know how many days you actually made direct observations?
The date in the cafeteria, I mean, when I went to talk to the PE teacher, Delara was in there. When I talked to the computer teacher, Delara was in there. Didn't necessarily make an account of that. I just wanted to draw conclusions based upon the behavior that I saw in a variety of environments.
Right. Okay, so again, give me over a time period. Is that over 2 months as well?
Yeah, it
Okay.
was.
All right, and so those are, is there any significance, and I'm not trying to make something out of nothing, but is there any significance about when you would go and make those observations in relationship to the testing you were doing?
No, because we're trying to get information with regard to what it looks like most of the time. Sometimes if you funnel it all into a week, and that happens to be a bad week, you may have misrepresented information.
Sure, absolutely.
Or if she's on the front end of an illness, you might have misrepresented information. So it's generally in students' best interest to spread it out over that time.
Okay, and that's what you did,
I did.
right? So you feel like, based upon the opportunity that you had and the child that you had to work with, and your experience in doing these, you got good information. You're comfortable with that?
I got the best I could get based within the limitations of Delara's cooperation and motivation.
Right. Now, that is, though, all the observations and the behavioral things, indirect and direct observations, would you agree with me that those are generally, though, all school setting observations, right?
Yes,
Okay.
they are.
So you didn't go to father's home and make an observation?
No, no.
You didn't likewise make any observations of mother or anything?
No, that's the reason or justification for the rating scales, so that parents can complete those and provide that information themselves based upon their perspective.
Okay, and you rely upon the parents to give you as good of information as they can? So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, they're vested in their youngster, and they want help.
You got on this report that you did interviews, you have Ms. Pickett, Ms. Getz, Ms. Fraser, Ms. Harris, Ms. Scobie, Robertson, Freddie, Mr. Gadare, Ms. Hubble, and Delara. So was that all, did you cover all her teachers? Did you get a chance to meet all her teachers? Was there any that was missed?
I think I got all of them, but there may have been somebody I missed.
Okay,
But those are the ones that I talked to directly.
all right. And then Ms. Casey has already been before this court and talked a little bit about counseling Delara, but Ms. Harris, was she doing active counseling with Delara as well?
I think that she's been involved frequently as well.
Okay.
I think they tag team and they work together. If Ms. Casey is with a classroom, then they call Ms. Harris. So Delara knows both of them and knows that both of them will keep her safe, but will hold her accountable and remove her to a safe place.
Did you do the interviews before you did any of the observations or conducted any testing?
They all happened
Okay,
around a variety of times,
okay, so.
in no particular order.
All right, so there's no, and you don't really, so, and I guess the question I'm getting to is whether or not you conduct the interviews in advance so that you get any preliminary information going into it, or is that necessary?
Not necessarily,
Okay.
right. The first thing I did, absolutely, in terms of the assessment, was to do the cognitive assessment with Delara on that day, asking if somebody was up for some challenges.
Okay. Now, you talked about, there was a little bit of question about how she feels and about herself. You did mention that when Delara, and I'm assuming she ultimately built enough rapport with you that she could do a self-report to you about these questions related to depression.
Yes,
Okay. So I would assume that was a little bit later in the
it
game.
was.
And you have on page 10, like several statements that she said. Tell me, were those all part of that testing?
Yes, those were the options she chose in the bank of options
Okay.
that she had available.
All right, so that she didn't write those out
No,
from her own.
no.
But she saw those and she made those choices to
There's
identify
choice of
herself.
3, and one is usually very neutral. Another one is a little problematic and more problematic. So it's a hierarchy of problematic concerns.
Okay. And then on page 11, you say items judged to be inaccurate. And you've got 2 things there.
I
have
do.
plenty of friends, and it's easy for me to get along with friends, both about social interaction. I found that interesting. So tell me, from the testing, what was your interpretation as to why Delara would make those inaccurate selections after having made all of these others?
I think Delara sees herself as having a lot of friends. I don't think she understands truly what friendships are, that it's a give and take and it's caring about other children, and that they care about you, and that you have that reciprocal interaction with children. I don't think she experiences that. So I think that's part of the inaccuracy.
You mentioned in here specifically one incident that you observed in the cafeteria that involved another child.
Right.
And was that a boy or a girl?
It was a boy.
All right, now was she sitting in proximity to that child?
She was across the table.
And so did you observe any interaction between them before she picked up his milk carton?
No. None.
So you didn't see him teasing her or taunting her?
Not at all.
Or the opposite?
He was talking to the person sitting beside him.
And was she engaging with anybody else
No.
at the table?
No, not at that time.
Did you have the opportunity, you talked about going in the classroom and stuff, but did you have the opportunity to make observations of Delara in school settings that were social settings, such as the playground, and we talked a little bit about cafeteria, but playground or anything like that?
I talked to Miss Pickett about observations about behavior on the playground, but I didn't observe it myself.
Okay. So when she was, what you did observe, her sitting in the cafeteria, was she engaging with anybody while she was eating lunch?
No.
All right, and then.
Not
so-
until the moment that she put herself into the situation and began engaging.
And how did that little boy react?
Oh, he was appalled.
Did he appear, did he do anything in response to her, or?
He immediately raised his hand. That's what the children are instructed to do when they need the support of the cafeteria helper.
Okay, so did
They
an
raise
adult-
their hand so that an adult will come over and help them.
Okay, so did an adult come over?
Yes.
And did you observe anything in that exchange?
He said she poured the milk.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about what they said, but
Okay.
did you make any observations of Delara after the adult comes over and is trying to remedy the situation? Do you see any reactions?
Oh, yeah, she was, I didn't, you were talking about me, it's not my fault.
Okay,
That kind of thing, not taking responsibility for it.
okay.
Because she knew by routine that if you do something like that, you're going to get into trouble. And I think she was backpedaling real quick.
How did that resolve?
She got in trouble.
And I think you also stated that that particular day when they had to line up to leave, she got in the back of the line.
Delara kind of does things in her own time, in her own way, and that day was no exception. When the teacher calls them to line up, she just sort of takes her time and borders on being non-compliant. But she did line up.
So she resists instruction
She does.
and she resists integration in a setting.
In that circumstance, she did. I'm guessing that she feels safer a little removed, perhaps, than in the middle of the group.
And Ms. Pickett made observations of her that she told this court about, that if they have, for instance, a activity in the classroom which involves a small group of 3 or 4 kids trying to work together on something, that she does not work well in that environment. Is that consistent with the testing and stuff that you've done?
Yes, it is.
Do you, you talked a little bit about self-esteem, you talked a little bit about her feelings of not being in control. Does that include perhaps a feeling of helplessness?
Oh, sure.
Now, that you were asked about if she knew too much about these proceedings, but I did not see anywhere in your report, anywhere where you specifically got that information, got some kind of specific information like that about her saying that, or even from the teachers. So the question about does she know too much about what's going on, could you just explain that a little bit more, what you meant by that? Because I don't want anybody to have any assumptions.
The comments that she has said to, I think, all of us, that I'm not going to be good. I don't have to, if I'm good, I can't see my mom. My dad's not going to let me see my mom. And that's her take on it. And I don't know how much she knows about the proceedings, but I'm guessing with her intelligence that she picks up more than we think perhaps she does. And since she's so vested in the outcome of being able to see her mom, spend time with both her parents, that she's listening and watching for any opportunity to learn something about that.
And you actually, and I can't find it right now, but when I read your report, one of the first things I noticed was a statement that you had put in this report of her saying that even if she's good, she doesn't get to see her mom. Do you recall that?
I do.
And can you tell me what the context was in which Delara shared that information with you?
That was one of the days when she was in trouble.
Okay.
And, we were trying to help her understand that she can have a really good day. It's all about choices.
And her response to that
Yeah,
was, even if I'm good, I don't get to see my mom.
right.
To your knowledge, is this the first psychoeducational or school psychological report Delara has had in her academic career?
She had a psychological when she was in kindergarten or preschool where they assessed her for giftedness.
Okay. But they didn't do these other scales, like
No.
social adaptability and depression, right?
Right, correct.
Okay.
She
Right, let me
was,
ask the question.
okay.
All right, Ms. Mack?
Just one second. Ms. Ashford.
Yes, ma'am.
Going in right into where Ms. Regulate left off from, the prior assessment that was done of Delara, there weren't any behavioral concerns at that time, correct?
Well, if there, frequently when we get a referral for gifted, it's just straightforward for gifted, and that's all and that's usually at the request of a parent. So that wouldn't have been something that would be addressed if the request was for a gifted evaluation.
All right, and when you stated that that was in kindergarten?
I have to look back and see when that was. I have the scores here. It was I think it was in 2014. I guess it was, yeah, during kindergarten year
Okay.
at Cole.
Yeah, at Cole Elementary.
Yes, ma'am.
And wow, just based upon how that normally happens in regards to a diagnosis or getting into an ED, IEP plan, that, isn't it true that it has to start the process of testing and evaluation? You have to have that data, correct?
Absolutely.
And so when you're assessing Delara, you don't have any of that data or a reason to at the time that you assess for
Collect.
gifted, correct?
Oh, right, exactly.
Okay, all right. And so what you testified to earlier was the only reason that you assessed her for gifted because a parent presented that.
Typically, and when I look at the areas that were assessed, there are 3 subtests that are listed under the Woodcock-Johnson. We only do those 3 subtests for preschoolers, so the assessment technically had to have happened before she started kindergarten.
Right.
She had to have been a preschooler during that time.
Right. And so with that and understanding and helping us have a clearer understanding of the testing and assessments that you've done of Delara over this time frame, you now have one where you've determined that Delara is emotionally disturbed.
Yes, ma'am.
You understand why we're here today?
I do. I assume I do.
Sounds like Delara is the one that's on trial though, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Delara, gifted kid, educationally, but socially, emotionally.
But she's no longer, wouldn't be classified as gifted any longer.
Right, I'm saying this is where she was. And now, she's classified, she went from a gifted kid to an ED kid. Status changed, right?
Well, a student can still be gifted and
understand.
emotionally disturbed.
Right. Let's talk about those kids
Okay.
that can still be gifted and emotionally disturbed at the same time.
Okay.
We've heard some questions, I say doctor, but she, in essence, has a Juris Doctorate.
She
so,
does.
Ms. Getz talked about Gower being kind of 25% percentile, 25% of special ed students in that population there.
Yes.
Above, far and above what's normal of the 10%, correct? And so with that, you guys have a lot more tools in your setting there to address
do.
the needs for special ed children.
And a lot more expertise.
And a lot more expertise. Now, originally Delara, I didn't have, she just now got this status of emotionally disturbed in April of 2017.
Yes.
Now, the IEP that is developed, just based upon your information, I don't know if you've read it, but it's not a fix-all for everything, is it?
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. So,
It's a binding contract that can be amended as long as the parents give permission for it to be amended.
okay, as long as the parents give permission for it to be amended.
Yes.
So you not only have to have the responsibility from the school you have that, they have responsibilities, correct?
Absolutely,
The parents have responsibilities, correct?
Absolutely.
And the child.
absolutely.
And so when we look at those expectations of the parents, what does a child that is gifted but now has this status of emotionally disturbed, what kind of setting is her needs best met in with the parents?
In the best world, it would require all parties working together, all three parties, parents, school, and Delara.
Okay.
The more the parties work together, the faster and more permanent the improvement can be.
Now, faster, more permanent, if working together.
Correct.
What about if they believe in it? They believe in it.
You can believe in something, but sometimes you're not equipped, even if you believe in it, to know how to fix it. So sometimes you have to ask for a different kind of support
Has
in
anyone
the home
asked-
environment or in the school
Has
environment.
anyone asked for a second opinion from the school? Did they disagree with the IEP?
No, I haven't heard if they
You
did.
haven't had an appeal of that decision,
No,
correct?
no.
Now, in that meeting where you developed this IEP, discussed your recommendations in there, was it explained in detail what ED means to the parents?
Yes, ma'am.
Was it explained to them the goal for the development of this IEP?
Yes,
for
ma'am.
Laura?
Yes, ma'am.
What is the goal, ma'am?
The goal is to put procedures and support in place to improve Delara's behavior and well-being, so that she can access her educational opportunities to her potential.
Goal is to just be so that Laura can achieve an education.
Yeah, and be all she can be.
But if she's not socially, emotionally getting her needs met, is that difficult?
Absolutely.
If her home life is not stable and consistent, is that difficult for a child with this kind of diagnosis?
Predictability is good for all children. It's a safety feel.
Animosity, tension in the home life with the parents, does that, and I know you're going to say with any child, but I'm talking about with Delara, would that be a detriment or a benefit for Delara?
Oh, it would never be a benefit.
So if where you've heard about the mom posting Delara's psychological on Facebook, you've heard this, have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, and I don't know what parts were posted, so I don't have
At any
an opinion.
At any point, have you ever been individually or one-on-one with the parents to say to the parents, here's what you could do to help your daughter when she comes to school have a better opportunity to learn? At any point, do you ever have those conversations with parents?
We generally do in the course of the IEP meeting, and we did with Delara's dad.
Okay, but have you ever done that with the mom?
She asked for a copy of the psychological, and no, I never met Mom face to face. And I did emphasize the confidentiality, the responsibility she bears as a parent, and sent her
What do you mean by the
copy.
responsibilities she bears as a parent?
Well, it's parents' job to protect their children. And the confidentiality is one of the ways in which we protect our children. Exposing only what needs to be exposed to the stakeholders.
Judge, I object. I've kind of just been quiet and let Ms. Mack go because I know she's.
I didn't expect, I let her go and I didn't stop her, so there you go. That's my fault because I was captivated. That's my fault.
So you're going to stop
Yeah,
that?
I'm sorry.
Going to move on?
I'm sorry,
Thank
I'm
you.
moving on. Okay. Now, when you do your psychological assessments with the children, have you ever had an opportunity with Delara where Delara has stated that she's unsafe around her mother or her father at
No.
all?
No, she's
That
never
she-
said that.
That she hates and never wants to see her mother or her father?
No,
In fact, isn't it true that Delara says, I want to visit with my mom?
she does.
I really liked it when I was visiting with my mom. But you testified earlier about Delara and some communications that Delara seems to have an appetite to listen to when she wants to try to find information about something in regards to the case. When you testify
In regards to her life.
in regards to her life, how do you come to believe that Delara seems to be hearkening her ear to hear things like that?
I mean, when she's been in trouble in the office, she's attending to what's going on and who Miss Getz is calling, and, I mean, she's vested.
Has there ever been a time where Delara, you talked about where Delara was saying about if something would happen that she might not get to see her dad might not let her get to see her mother. What did you mean by that?
When we were talking to her, asking her to make a better choice,
Uh-huh.
and talking about the good things that would happen at school
Uh-huh.
if she made a better choice,
Yes, ma'am.
her comment was, well, even if I'm good, I still don't get to see my mom.
And at any point did she say that her dad won't let her see her mom?
I don't recall whether she used dad in that context or not.
Okay. I've gone through, and in your report, and I don't know if you make the habit of saying that Delara's having these issues because her parents won't get along. I don't see you saying any of this in there, do you?
No,
I don't even hear you say Delara's having these issues because she hasn't visited with her mom.
no.
I also don't hear you saying in your report that Delara's having these issues because her dad has been mean to her mom.
Correct.
So what I do see is that you specify that a child, my client, has said, I have thoughts of killing myself,
But I won't do it.
but I won't do it.
Yeah.
Does anybody go in and expound with her on those responses at any point at school?
That was my responsibility, and we did expound on that, and that's as far as she was willing to go.
When you have that kind of statement or response, you don't reach out to the parents and say, hey, I have a concern with your daughter's mental stability. I understand you do the report, but do you reach out and say, look, this is a big deal here. You need to.
We did talk about it in the IEP meeting, these responses.
To both mom and dad, or just
No,
dad?
to dad.
Okay. You testified earlier that you would recommend that she continue with Dr. Berryman.
Certainly. I also would suggest, we're not given manuals. Some children are more difficult to raise at different times of their life. And, as parents, we're often overwhelmed. Sometimes we can't be as objective as we need to be. And that's why we involve a behavior specialist that sometimes comes into the school and sits in the classroom, because it's hard for teachers to separate that out. But somebody that's trained, it's part of what they do, and they take data and they determine the best way of implementing these behavior changes, and they often result in positive outcomes.
Now,
I think that dad could benefit from perhaps that opportunity in his home environment or in mom's home environment. so that we all work together to help facilitate this growth and this improvement for her, so she doesn't feel these awful things.
So I noticed that you, because of your recommendations here, there's a plan that's been put in place at school.
Yes, ma'am.
And you're recommending that she continue with therapy and the parents get some understanding. Did you, at any point in that IEP, make a recommendation for the parents so they can kind of really grasp this? Because this is new, this is a new thing for them, right?
I didn't mention the behavior therapist, but I did mention to Dad perhaps talking with Dr. Berryman. I knew that based upon her conversation during the S-team when we talked about the evaluation, that they had considered medication, and of course it's a last resort. But this young lady needs some kind of relief, and sometimes by taking the edge off with medication, they can feel more positive and be able to see the differences their choices are making. But that's totally up to parents to make that decision. That's not my jurisdiction. That's a medical between them and their doctor.
Can you tell the court today that with Delara, we have a plan in place, and yesterday she is now scratched and drew blood. Can a setting like Gower continue to be a best placement for her?
It can, because we were seeing improvement. This is not unusual for students to be looking like they're making gains and then blow it out of the water again.
Okay.
That's normal, and so it's not unexpected.
So is it like saying it's normal to see
It's like
progress?
2
but-
steps forward, 1 step back.
So that's expected.
So that's not to say that she won't continue to move forward with this plan.
So if she doesn't get medication, not behavioral therapy, doesn't remain with Dr. Berryman, parents don't remain united, at some point, if we're not all working together,
Or if the plan at school, we can't control the outside influences and opportunities. We can only
But does
control the educational setting.
but does the outside influences affect the educational setting?
Absolutely.
So if these parents don't get it together and work together for Delara, the risk is, what's the alternative placements for Delara? A kid like Delara that's manifesting these behaviors.
In metro schools, we have other programs that are outside the typical school setting, where they're self-contained programs. They're a much more restrictive environment, and by law, we're supposed to consider the least restrictive first.
What do you mean when you say least restrictive? Because we've got to be clear for the court.
Okay. The least restrictive environment is what the student needs to make changes. The least restrictive for one student may be different than the least restrictive for another student. But the more supports we put in place that keep a student from accessing normalcy generally constitutes more restrictive. Does that make sense? Okay.
So least restrictive, if we can get this IEP together, we can keep Delara in a regular educational setting. I don't understand why my words are twisted. We can keep her in a regular classroom, a regular educational setting with the
We would
tools in
hope.
there.
Yes, yes,
That's the
yes. That's
goal.
what we want.
That's the goal.
Yes.
However, if that doesn't work, what's the next option?
Well, there are a variety of options, but outside of that building, there are other settings that are more aligned with behavior support. students work independently with regard to their academic levels, generally, but the behavior supports, all the students have the same kinds of difficulties. They all have serious behavior concerns.
It's a smaller setting.
It is a smaller setting, and the student-teacher ratio is much smaller.
They can restrain at those places too, can't they?
Some of them.
With what you're telling us today about what could take place with Delara if we don't get this working, does it sound as if a homeschool setting would work best for Delara?
Oh, no.
Why?
That's the difficulty that Delara experiences, is being in a setting with people and learning how to be socially adept, how to become involved with her peers in an acceptable, positive, fun way.
But kids do homeschool all the time and still go on to be normal, socially, emotionally developed kids, right?
They do.
What's the difference with Delara?
Delara is demonstrating she doesn't have that clear understanding of those social expectations and values.
So you've gone through, strike that, not been a second request for, a request for a second recommendation or second evaluation from an outside source by either parent, correct? And it seems that this plan is working
Mhm.
based upon your knowledge, information, and belief.
I do.
And it sounds like this is normal for Delara to kind of have what we would call in the course sometimes like a relapse
Absolutely.
from progress. But if she were placed in a homeschool setting without those tools and those interventions and those supports, what would be missing out of that homeschool setting?
The social component, the part that she struggles with.
But does everyone have to be social?
In life, eventually you do. Hopefully she's going to go to college. You don't do that in
You can do it
homeschool.
online.
You can, but someday she's going to have a job. I guess you could work online,
Right.
but doesn't it sort of dictate that it's closing some doors instead of opening doors?
I don't know. So it's your testimony that you did talk to the father about the severity and the importance of being united and helping Delara going forward.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you believe that Mr. Gadere understood
I do.
the significance
I
of
do.
the services needed for his daughter?
I do.
Have you ever had the privilege of talking with the mother over the phone or via email?
Via email, she has
Okay.
sent me some emails.
Do you believe she understands the severity of the needs for Delara educationally at this point?
Judge, I'm going to object to her mind reading what's in the client.
There you go, thank you.
One of the things that when you did this was for school purposes only, correct?
Correct.
But some of the things that you gave that were recommendations of how to work with Delara on pages 11 and 12,
Yes, ma'am.
wouldn't some of those be applicable for at home as well?
Absolutely.
Or at summer camp?
Absolutely.
Or at church? So it would be safe to say that these are things that should follow Delara in whatever setting she's in.
Mhm.
Now, we talked about why did it take so long for us to get here? Do you know why it took so long?
No. Aside from the fact that her behavior was escalating,
Was escalating. Did we find anything that was causing the escalation in the behaviors?
I don't think we clearly identified what the causal factors were.
Okay.
I think there were probably multiple factors, but
Was there a pattern with her behaviors?
as unpredictable as Delara's behavior typically is, there were some patterns, absolutely.
Okay, what were some of those patterns?
Well, the patterns were when she was asked to do a non-preferred task, something that she didn't have confidence in.
Okay.
Math,
Okay,
for one.
okay.
She was less agreeable, less motivated, less willing to perform.
So basically, when Delara didn't want to do something, she acted up. Is that what it sounds like?
Yeah.
When she didn't get her way, she acted out.
Mhm.
But isn't that the typical kid? Or even the typical adult on some days?
It can be, but Delara took it further than that, and that
What did she do?
her acting out became a danger to herself and others, and I think that was the fear that she would hurt herself or someone else.
Is she really aggressive? I mean, is it just like a slap on the hand?
Oh.
Is she accidentally scratching because her nails are long?
No, she was extremely aggressive.
So in all actuality, you really had come to know Delara even before you started assessing her, didn't you?
Some, yeah.
In your seeing Delara and all of those things, did you have any concerns before you began your testing?
I didn't know enough about Delara's thoughts and skill levels to draw those conclusions.
And another, I think we said that there's a pattern when she doesn't want to do things. Are there any triggers on the violent tendencies from her?
She doesn't like to be touched.
Okay. Okay. So doesn't like to be touched and doesn't like to be told no,
Or told what to do.
or told what to do. Okay. And you had to review her CUNY file in order to do
Sure.
this assessment.
Sure.
And in reviewing, to your recollection, reviewing her CUNY file, you believe that it's more recently that the behaviors became escalated in the 2016-2017 school year?
That they really began to escalate to a place where something, where she needed more support than the regular ed programming could provide.
Now, this is where it is key to me. Is it normal that a kid that gets a diagnosis, or what's the terminology that I should be using? A diagnosis or
Meets criteria for
meets
handicap.
criteria for
Handicap.
emotionally disturbed. Is it normal to not really catch it until right about this area?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not as if someone has done something neglectful or failed to do something in regards
Absolutely.
to
Right,
helping her in the school setting,
right.
because she's been at Gower since August of 2015,
Right.
correct? You talked about the 5 direct observations that you had with Delara, roughly during this assessment. Some of those were in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
some of those were in the afternoon. were some of them around lunchtime, I think you said earlier. So you saw her morning, noon, and afternoon. Was her, when she presented in the morning, did she present to be well-groomed, well-fed?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Well-rested at any?
Mhm.
Because what she says over here, on one of her responses were that she wasn't sleeping well at night, or, I don't want to state it incorrectly. In her responses to how she felt, and she made those statements.
I have trouble sleeping many nights.
I have trouble sleeping many nights. Did you expound on that question or that response?
No, I did not.
Okay. Would that be can her not having a well-rested night be a contributing factor with her escalation in her behaviors?
Anybody.
Okay. I knew that answer.
The judge did too.
Absolutely.
In those 5 times that you did directly contact with, have direct observation with Delara, you don't have any personal knowledge of whether or not she had seen her mother or not seen her mother.
No.
And when you were doing those evaluations, I think you testified that you had a 15-minute window with Delara.
When I was directly with her for
Uh-huh.
assessment.
Right, but there were other times that
Before
you
she
were
would
just observing
lose.
her.
Right.
Right. And so in either of those times that you were observing her, you had zero idea of whether or not she had contact with her mother.
Right, correct.
So, and all of her behaviors were seemingly the same behaviors throughout the year, correct?
They were.
Ms. Pickett had testified earlier and she presented her calendars. Have you had the opportunity to review Ms. Pickett's
No,
calendars?
I haven't.
Have you had conversations with Ms. Pickett in regards to the behaviors from August 5th up
No.
until the plan was put in place?
We talked about behavior as a general
Uh-huh.
and how they escalated, but we never talked about the sequence or the day-to-day pattern.
And you never asked Mr. Gadere or Ms. Hubble what changed in Delara's home life or what contributing factors would have been to cause this escalation starting in August of 2016, did you?
No,
Did you ask Delara?
no,
So you were unaware of whether or not it was the custody dispute that was causing these escalations or the sun turning blue on any given day? You don't know.
correct.
So you said something earlier about factors that contribute to the testing. You highlighted illness as being one of the factors that would have contributed, like if Delara was sick.
Right,
anything
or
like-
fearful.
Or fearful. Why would you specify or fearful?
Because those are one of the 5 factors that help
Okay.
us identify serious concerns with regard to emotional disturbance.
Okay, illness, say the 5 factors for the record for me,
I have to look at them.
and that's fine.
Building and sustaining relationships, inability to learn, inappropriate behavior, unhappiness or depression, and physical symptoms or fears.
Physical symptoms or fears. And to you directly, did Delara communicate any fears with her dad?
No,
Any fears with her mom?
no, other than being afraid she wouldn't see her mom.
We talked about the 5 factors that are the contributing factors there. Can you tell the court about the factors that would contribute outside of, you said behavioral therapy, individual counseling for the child, and unity with the parents? Is there any additional factor that would contribute to the success of this plan for Delara?
Medical involvement,
Medical involvement meaning what?
being monitored by a physician.
Being monitored by a physician. What kind of physician?
A psychiatrist, a physician that was very comfortable with understanding behavior and depression.
Okay. Do you believe that, that it would be good for Delara's individual primary pediatrician to be on board with all of this as
Absolutely.
well?
Yes.
So can you tell, for the record, what you said, medical providers, psychiatrists, pediatrician, and you said, I just need you to say
Oh,
yes or no.
pediatrician, psychiatrist.
Okay, pediatrician, psychiatrist, and parents, Delara,
Behavior support,
Behavior support.
BCBA.
can she get that behavior support at school and outside of school?
There are agencies that provide it privately as well as at school.
Is this need for a BCBA, would that be a long-term thing for Delara?
I wouldn't think so.
What would be the goal, to your understanding, of what a BCBA would help Delara with?
A BCBA would come into the home and offer an objective plan after taking data and talking at length with parents to
With who?
parents,
Not just parent, not just the custodial parent?
depending on which environment that he or she are working, what framework
Uh-huh.
she's coming from, or the therapist is coming from. And then would identify the plan, and I think at the outset would be more involved with helping the plan, implement the plan, but then would be on more of a helping to monitor this, sustaining the plan and the outcomes and revising the plan. So generally, it takes more on the front end and less on the back end. That's what we see at school as well.
Now, we have summer coming up for Delara.
Yes.
You guys haven't recommended that she do an extended school year or anything like that, correct?
Correct.
So what would, a kid with this kind of diagnosis, what would the traditional summer setting be recommended to the parents for her?
There really isn't. ESY is traditionally for, to help students maintain skills. It's not to grow skills, but it's to maintenance.
And you haven't recommended year-round school for her either, correct?
Correct.
And so if that being said, that means, isn't it true that that means that Delara can do function in like aftercare and daycare programs and things like that? She can go to summer school programs. But if she were to do that, would it be key for whoever is going to be working with her to know this information and recommendations for how to work with her?
I would think so. I think the more the people that work with her understand her, the less opportunity Delara has for sustaining the behavior that's gotten her into the place where she is right now.
Babysitter, would it help the babysitter to know how to work with Delara?
If it's within the scope of what the babysitter understands, it's you.
Is Delara the kind of kid that you can just drop off anywhere and they not know what
Just
to?
I'm gonna eject. I've been really lenient
Yeah,
with Miss
Mrs.
Mack.
Day.
I've kind of let her just go wherever she wants to go, but there was a psycho.
I'm the same.
Thank you.
So that would be a no?
I think she's just saying that.
I did the same. I
She
did the
already
same.
responded, so that's all my questions.
All right, anything else, Ms. Digby?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly.
Ask for, I see the light at the end of the tunnel.
For you.
For you, yeah, not for us.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry for you guys.
Ms. Ashford, you spoke about IEP as though it's a contract between the school and the parents.
It
Is
is.
that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What are the parents' responsibilities for an IEP?
to make sure that they safeguard their child's rights and that it's fully implemented, and that it's in their child's best interest.
And is there anything that the school expects the parents to do in return for what the school is doing?
To be involved and be available if they have to call. Sometimes we use some children, we might even call the parents when on this hierarchy of behavior support. And the parents are involved in talking with their child to get them, help them calm down. It's different for each individual.
Does the school expect that the parents will take seriously the recommendations of the IEP and comply with whatever is listed in the IEP?
Sure.
What happens if parents don't comply with the IEP?
Well, if they're not reachable, or if there's an emergency and we can't reach a parent, then they're kind of in DCS territory, in my opinion. That's my thought.
If parents aren't taking the same approach as the school is in addressing those behavior issues, does that undermine the IEP process?
It can. Children are often pretty savvy. They know that in this environment they can act like this, and in this environment they can act like this. So, they learn the rules of the different environments. We can't control the environments outside of school. Our objective is to write an IEP to help improve behavior within the bounds of school, and hope that parents are on board and are available to implement similar processes at home.
If parents are not on board with the IEP and undermine the school to the child, can that affect how effective the IEP would be?
It can.
You were in the room before court got started, were you not?
I was.
And did Ms. Hebel show you a picture of a spelling test that Delara had taken?
She did.
And on that test, did she point out to you that Delara had written, "You can't make me ha ha"?
Yes.
And did she seem to be laughing about that?
She did. She thought it was a creative way of Delara responding to not wanting to be compliant about the spelling test.
Did she make a comment to you somewhere around the lines of, well, it's better than her breaking someone's toe?
Yes.
No further questions.
I'm just going to stand here. I have a few questions. First of all, in the guardian ad litem, I asked you a question and you responded spontaneously, a little bit different when you did when the guardian ad litem asked you. I hate to put you in that position, but we were talking about comment that Delara had made in this exchange, and you were trying to get her to calm down. When I asked you the question, you said she made the comment, even if I'm good, Dad won't let me see Mom, is the way you responded first. When the guardian ad litem asked you more about that, you said when we ask her to make a better choice, she said, I still don't get to see my mom. So I don't know if you can clarify that.
Clarify which was which.
Yeah, because you did make a, your first response was, Dad won't let me see Mom, even if I'm good. Do you have a memory of that?
I do. Well, I don't of that exact moment. I know there have been times where she has used Dad, and there have been times that she just said, I won't get to see my mom.
Okay.
Implying Dad.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And you've been asked some questions here about cause, such as she didn't say it was caused by this or caused by that, but really in doing this assessment, that didn't have anything to do with what you were doing,
Absolutely.
right? as an assessment and as this tool, as you went through it very well, this is really to take a snapshot of where this child is
Absolutely.
right now. So you
Yes,
don't
ma'am.
really know what the cause is.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, it didn't happen yesterday, right?
Correct.
Didn't happen last week.
Right.
It's been going on, developing, creating for a while. This is where this child is headed, basically,
Yes.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, and you also made some comments, Ms. Mack was asking you some questions about escalation points, and I got a little bit confused about that, and I just want to make sure, because we've already heard from the teacher, and we've already heard from Ms. Getz, I mean, their comments about when things escalated, when they didn't escalate. What is your opinion as to when her behaviors escalated? The spring of 2016? Or do you even really know?
Looking back through her cume, typically I look at report cards because on the back of each 9 weeks, the teacher will write a little comment
Right.
about academics or behavior.
Right.
I did notice at the first grade year that the teacher had mentioned that Delara appears to be trying to make better choices, that kind of thing, which told me that, okay, there's some behavior concerns, but she's working within that framework.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so Ms. Getz testified that in the spring of
Objection to talking about what somebody else testified
Well, it's
about.
already
That's
in the-
hearsay. She wasn't here for it. There's a reason we pulled the rule.
She's already testified, it's in the record. I'm asking her about if that is consistent with her belief. You can do that. She's already testified, it's already in the record.
But there's a whole reason we have witnesses sit separately so that they don't know what the other witness
Right.
testified about, so we can check what they said.
Oh.
Exactly.
I'll sustain.
Okay, so have you discussed with Ms. Getz or anybody else as to when they believe Delara's behaviors escalated?
No.
Okay, so that's just based upon your own review of basically report cards. All right, so you didn't
Right.
have as much hands-on time with her at the beginning of, or the end of the first grade year is probably a better way to say
No.
that. Did you know that she had changed teachers in the middle of the first grade year?
Yes, it was on the report card.
Okay, so who would have, during that second semester of her first grade, who would have had more contact with Delara, you or Ms. Getz?
Miss Getz.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you believe that Delara has an attachment disorder? Or that should be ruled out?
Surely there are some attachment issues. I'm not sure of the gravity of those issues in making that diagnosis.
As an educational psychologist, do you think that's something that should be ruled out and further investigated?
Sure.
Okay, nothing further.
Ms. Mack, anything else? Ms. Mack? Anything else?
Oh, no,
All right. Woo! Ms. Ashford, 2 days in a row. We are done. Thank you so much for your time.
Here you go, babe.
Thank you.
You are free to leave. You're more than welcome to remain with us if you'd like for the rest of the
That's
year.
okay. That's okay. Respectfully declined.
I hear you. Nobody ever wants to do that, so I don't know why. All right, we're going to take about a 10-minute stretch break.
Seated folks in recess for 10 minutes.